I have a topic that I think everybody can relate to. Everybody will have their own opinion on it. And I am very, very curious of quite literally everyone's opinion on it. This is one of those situations where literally everybody's opinion matters. Because I want to talk about the difference between modern day wrestling and pastime wrestling. This is kind of a mental thing for me. So I'm going to freestyle this video. I don't know where it's going to go, but I think that by the end of this, or probably within the first 5 minutes of this, you guys are going to have your own opinion on it as well. The question that I have is, has wrestling truly ever changed? The more I think about it, the more I realize that the more things change, the more things stay the same. And I want to go back, if you guys can indulge me in this, I want to go back to a time where I was young Wyzanow, right? Where I very first started watching wrestling. I was 3 years old, sitting on my grandpappy's lap, watching JYD the Junkyard Dog. And one thing that Junkyard Dog was definitely known for was his headbutts. And in my family, we're not really the affectionate type like that, so you don't really hear the words "I love you" too much, right? So one of the ways that my grandfather and I would express that affection would be a headbutt. That was his "I love you" to me. And it was just something that we did all the time. When I got older and I had my own kids, it was something that I did with them as well. It was always give me a headbutt. And to this day, it's still give me a headbutt. And they both know what it means, right? And it goes without saying. It wasn't something that I ever had to say to them. The reason I bring this up is because when you think of Junkyard Dog today, you don't think of him pre-WWE when he was one of the highest drawing black wrestlers of his time. You don't think of him that way. You think of him in WWE where, they had him dancing and it was pure entertainment. But growing up, he was one of my favorites at a very young age. And then we had guys like Macho Man, another one of my favorites. Ricky Steamboat was really high up there as my favorite. Ultimate Warrior, Hogan, these guys were my favorites, right? And this was all in the late 80s and early 90s, but more so in the late 80s. Again, as I was growing up through that, I want to say it started in 87 is when I started watching, or at least that's my first memory of watching wrestling. When we move into the 90s and, we got cable, that's where you started to see more wrestling. So you bring in WCW, you bring in Georgia Championship Wrestling, you bring in some NWA stuff. I was able to watch AAA. I was able to watch all of the Spanish wrestling. Like, I consumed a lot of wrestling. I would say I watched wrestling as much as I watched cartoons. At a young age, you don't really fully understand what's going on, so you enjoy it from an entertainment perspective. Which is why a guy like the Great Muta, early to mid 90s, when I first saw him appear in WCW, never knew about him in Japan, but my first rendition of the Great Muta was seeing him as the guy that would come in because we got a big Van Vader problem in WCW. Vader was just running through everybody, and here comes the Great Muta out of nowhere to be the one to stand up to him. And the Great Muta coming in from Japan after getting his eye knocked out of his socket by Stan Hansen. He comes back from Japan and this guy is an absolute monster. And then you have the mystique of a Great Muta who didn't even have to talk. You bring in Gary Hart, who could be the mouthpiece for him, and you just have all mystique. And it was intriguing because you just don't know about this guy. Especially stateside, we don't know him. but it was just something about him. He had a certain charisma to him. He had a certain snap to his moves and in his matches that made him very believable, very entertaining, and again, without having to say a word. That was young me, enjoying wrestling. We moved forth into NWO, which was the mid-90s, where Hogan left from WWF to go into WCW. He's doing Thunder in Paradise. They done brought a whole new night of wrestling onto WCW. So you got WCW Nitro, and then you got Thunder. And it's like, yo, we're getting wrestling overload here. WWF had the Saturday Superstar thing, where I forget the exact name of it. It's not, again, we're freestyling here. But we had the thing that would come on Saturdays at 12, in which Hogan would only appear like once every 2 months. And then, they had Raw. And Monday Night Raw was a highlight show when it first came out. It would be a highlights of what happened on house shows and what happened on that's what it was called, Saturday Superstars. It would be highlights of the house shows, Superstars, and the pay-per-views. That was Raw for, I think, like the first 2 or 3 years, right? And again, it's like, oh my God, it's just so much wrestling. I ate wrestling up. Like, it just consumed me as a kid. And even when my grandfather died, wrestling just stayed with me. Like, I used to watch the pay-per-views on the cable, in which everything was blurry. You needed a scrambler in order to actually see what was going on. And we didn't have no scrambler. We lived in the projects. So I had to watch with the screen all scrambled up. And for every now and then, for a split second, they'll give you a semi-clear screen. And you're like, oh, that's what's happening. And besides that, you're just listening to everything that's going on, right? So I just enjoyed wrestling. Usher in the NWO into Nitro, Hogan turns, which just completely took over the wrestling world by storm, because you could never see Hulk Hogan becoming a bad guy. We weren't heels back then, at least to us. They were heels, but they weren't heels back then. They were bad guys, right? They were the good guys and they were the bad guys. So Hogan turning, it just mind fucked everybody, if I could say that on YouTube. Can we curse? I think I'm deep enough in this video so I could curse. So now we have NWO, and we have, I think, 11 or 12-year-old me. And I'm going through puberty, I'm in sports, everything is all cool. You're trying to be cool, and you want to either be the standout or you want to fit in with the cool kids and that whole thing. And everybody's going around just, giving their wolf packs out. What's that? The 2 sweets, not wolf packs. You're giving out your 2 sweets to your boys. You're spray painting, or you're taking the Sharpie and you're putting NWO on your shirts. It was just a cool time, right? And you ushering your attitude era, and it was just cool, right? But this is when people could start to think that wrestling changed from an older school way of doing things, with territory and everything being either looking very legit, to now we're starting to get into entertainment, but from a coolness standpoint. But there was a problem. Vince was already killing off the territories. So where you got your serious wrestling, that started to go by the wayside because Vince wanted entertainment. The problem is they went too heavy on the entertainment and turned a lot of people away. WCW found a way in which they can still have their serious stuff, but still provide you entertainment so that it could hit every demographic. And that's when you took those guys from AAA and you brought them into WCW to be your cruiserweights, and you had your light heavyweight division. You had those smaller guys that could fill in the mid card, while the guys that were at the top can be at the top. And when you look back, and this is why I introduced this with me talking about Junkyard Dog, Wrestling was always that way. You had your guys at the top, and then you have your guy like a JYD who can appeal to a certain demographic. That is one thing that has never left wrestling, was the ability to appeal to the younger audience. Now, why is it important to appeal to the younger audience, you may say? Well, for one, they're going to be the one that wants all of the merchandise. And for two, they are going to be the ones that watch into older age, a la me, who was brought in with the entertainment of a junkyard dog, who stayed through the different transitions of, let's say, an Ultimate Warrior and an Undertaker, and then you got your NWO, and then you got your Stone Cold Steve Austin, so forth and so on. You hook them when they're young with the entertainment so that when they get older, they can understand that things can be a bit more serious at the top. Has wrestling truly ever changed? I think not, because it still follows that same formula today. The only time where Vince had a downslope was in those early to mid 90s where he went pure entertainment, and his guys at the top was Brett and Shawn, and that was about it. Everybody else was entertainment. Granted, you had your Sid and your Diesel, and they didn't really stick around for too long. Your Yokozuna, who was, another serious guy, but I would say that WWF in those mid 90s went, I want to say, about 90% entertainment, characters, over the top personalities. I mean, you had Men on a Mission. If you don't know who Men on a Mission is, then dear God, I can't really be that old. But if you don't know who Men on a Mission is, look them up. And then after you do, look up Viscera's finishing move. But I digress. I feel as though another problem came when people started to see, and this is when a new era or a new generation of viewers got a little older. They got older with a certain entertainment base. They started to feel as though the certain entertainment portion of the wrestlers should probably be pushed a little bit higher. Should probably be put into the top tier. Should probably be put into the main event. It's how someone like a Rey Mysterio, who was a cruiserweight, who was lawn darted into a trailer by Kevin Nash, becomes a world champion. Now, why on earth would we ever do that? Is it one of those moments where it's, hey, it doesn't matter your size or your height, you can be anything you want to be? Well, then we're not looking at what reality really is. Are there outliers? Sure. And Rey Mysterio surely was an outlier. But if you ever want to take the business seriously, you can never make him your world champion. Can you? You can give him a title and make that title extremely important and make it so that that title is starting to push the upper limits of the upper mid card. That way, when you send them to a Mexico, or you have a show in Mexico or Puerto Rico or DR, just any Latin country, you can showcase him as the guy, and you can put your top title to the side for that show. That's why you could have a guy like Bad Bunny come in and put on a match with Damian Priest, and that match is like the top of the chain of that show, even though you had some matches that followed, but that's the match because you made that important for that show. But when I see something like a Dolph Ziggler winning the Money in the Bank and getting a top title, to me it starts to feel like a participation award. Everybody gets a trophy. Now we have what we call the IWC, who pushes for these certain things to happen, not really understanding that because you like somebody, that doesn't mean the business for them is good. This is why I would say that you have a Roman and then you have a Seth Rollins, and why one of the guys can be a household name, whereas the other guy just can't seem to get over that hump. Wrestling is a cosmetic business, and if you've been around long enough, you know that, and it's not disputed. You can't dispute it. Because you have your hardcore audience and you have your casual audience. And your hardcore audience stays, but your casual audience is always who you're trying to get. That way you can bring more eyeballs to your product. It's going to hurt to say this, but you can bring more eyes to your product with a Brock Lesnar today than you can with a Jey Uso or a Sami Zayn. That's an example that I can give that makes sense, that hopefully you can see it and it's undisputed. But again, I want your opinions on these things that I'm saying. Today we have a problem in which wrestling isn't being taken seriously, or being taken seriously enough for the older demographic to really sink their teeth into, to really want to like stay with the product. You're driving a lot of people away, or they're driving a lot of people away, because the older you get, the more serious you understand that life is. So when you are trying to escape your seriousness of life and you want your entertainment, you still want to understand that there's seriousness in here too. Is there entertainment? Absolutely. We have our truth. But when I see a guy like a Damian Priest, who has the look of someone that should be taken very seriously, he's oftentimes looked like as a joke. We're putting a lot of joke into a lot of main event product, and that's where divide comes, because we see ourselves saying like, man, if Seth Rollins could just be a little more seriously, then we could actually get behind him. But no, you get that and it's like, come on, bro. You can't get pussy talking like or laughing like that. There's no way. No way. However, if you look outside of yourself and you start to think, well, what about the younger demographic? The younger demographic loves what they're seeing in wrestling today, and it makes sense. However, I think that wrestling is suffering from early to mid 90s WWF fever than they are to when the product was hot. Everything can't be a joke. Your top characters or your top main event stars should not be taken as a joke. Now, there are times in which a top guy can show some personality and entertainment, and I understand it, because you do want to show a different side of them, a la Brock when he comes in holding the Money in the Bank briefcase as a boombox. You know, or Brock does some funny stuff, but at the same time, you know, when he turns it on, it's on. The same with Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns can laugh and smile and whatnot, but when he's ready to turn it on, it's on. They seem to be missing or lacking that in a lot of their other characters. Drew McIntyre, they take very seriously, but they can't seem to get him any wins. So therefore, why does anybody care about him? Why does adult me care about him? Why does teenage me care about him? Why does 3-year-old me care about Drew McIntyre? Nowhere in there do I care about him, because is he showing personality? Not really. Is he showing a serious side? Yes, but he's losing. What can we latch on to? I think the thing that may have, I don't want to say ruined me, but the thing that introduced me to the IWC was when I caught wind of Ring of Honor. And it filled a patch of my wrestling experience that I was experiencing at the time. There was a time where I stepped away from wrestling. There was around the time where I went to college. I was 21, so I took off from school for a couple of years before I went to college. But during that time, I just stopped watching wrestling. I think it was during the Reign of Terror days, and I was just like, I'm cool, right? So it was a long period of time between 2003 to about 2008 or 9, whenever it was that The Rock first came back to Raw and they turned out all the lights, and then there was lightning, and then If You Smell. And I remember it so vividly because I was at work and I was in there with a couple of coworkers, and we had it on my laptop. So I'm like, you know what, let me just turn on wrestling. Let's just see what's up. And we're looking at it, and then the lights go out on Raw. We're thinking like it was either a problem or the show was over. And then that lightning hit, and we all in there like, what the heck is going on here? Because none of us were really wrestling watchers. So, you know, if Dirt Sheets was saying that The Rock was coming back, we sure ain't know about it. But then we hear that If You Smell, and I mean, everybody in that office went crazy. It's moments like that that seemed to be gone. And I don't know if it's the internet that killed it. I don't know what it was. But anyway, back to ROH. So that was what brought me back into wrestling, was when that thing happened with The Rock, and then Nexus was going on, and it was just a wild time. But I first discovered ROH when CM Punk did his summer. Well, he did his pipe bomb, and it made me look into ROH. Now, I knew about ROH because I saw it one time when I was in South Carolina, and I just saw it on TV, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And my first memory was seeing the Briscoes against the Kings of Wrestling. And I'm like, what is this? Nah, I don't want to leave the hotel. No. Wrestling's on. I don't know who these people are, but this looked fire. And it was because it was two tag teams that just looked different. They took themselves seriously. They was in the middle of a feud, and I'm just engulfed. They're like, hey, we going to Waffle House. And we'll go on ahead to Waffle House. I got something here I need to watch. And since we didn't have that back up north, I could never get back to ROH because I didn't know where to find it. I didn't remember until CM Punk mentioned it in his pipe bomb. And I said, oh, ROH. And I went back and I started getting tapes. I started buying the DVDs of ROH. I started buying them. If I couldn't find it online, I started buying them. And then I found out about PWG. And one of my favorite matches of all time on the indie circuit is Chris Hero versus the Hurricane. I think that was his name. That was his name, right? The Hurricane, the black guy who, he had the cage match, and Candice LeRae was in there, and that man destroyed Candice LeRae in front of Chris Hero, and they had that match. Oh my God, I loved it. Favorite match of all time. But in watching ROH and watching stuff on the indies, I got to see a guy like Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly come up, because they were a tag team, a really young tag team at the time. I got to watch a Tommaso Ciampa come up because he was really young, and he was with the Embassy with Prince Nana. And Prince Nana wasn't dancing. I got to watch a Jay Lethal. I got to find out about Kevin Steen and El Generico and all of these guys, and I'm just like, where has this seriousness been all my life? Because by this time, I'm in my mid-20s. And I'm just like, I felt like something that I've been missing from my wrestling watching experience just jolted in me. I'm like, this is what was... Because I feel like I done graduated from all of the different experiences that wrestling could give you. And then you got this, and it's like, they're taking it seriously. And they're honing their craft on an independent circuit. And they understand how to play different roles and how those different roles can refine your character, so that when you go to a main stage, when you go to a bigger company, you are already prepared. But these guys were putting on classics. They were putting on classic matches. I never thought about what makes a great match or a 5-star match until I found out about ROH and I found out about the indies. And it was just giving me an experience that I just never witnessed in wrestling. So you take that experience and then you come back to WWE and you're like, well, where is it? Where's the seriousness? Why is everything a joke? Why is no one taking their characters seriously anymore? Why does no one really care about where they are on a card? Why is it not important to them? Why should I be invested? Why should I care? And that's why you have a lot of people who are, either hot or cold on the product today, because a lot of people that are watching are those people that grew up with the product and they're disappointed. Because there was a time where they seen seriousness somewhere and they saw what that did for a character, and they're like, bro, this sucks what they're doing today. Because Triple H pulled off a move that Vince pulled off in his day, and he killed off the indies. And you bring in all of those guys who took their craft seriously, and you bring them into NXT and WWE, and you WWEize them, and it's all gone. Kill Steen Kill should never be Fight Owens Fight. I'm sorry. That dude was a machine, and when he come out, you know that he is going to kill something. The American Dragon, Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson. Maybe there should have never been a Daniel Bryan. Now, granted, he made it work, but we never took him as seriously in WWE as we did on the indie circuit and in his Japan matches. We never did. Same thing they tried to do with Kenta or Hideo Itami. It's like, what are we doing to wrestling? Who are we marketing to? Are we still trying to market to the younger audience? Are we marketing to the teenagers? Or are we marketing to the older demographic? Who's our target audience in wrestling? Because when I look at my son and he sees that I'm watching wrestling, Dad, why are you watching that? You watching wrestling? Ugh, why are you watching wrestling? Shoot, and he's been saying that since he was about 8. And he's 11 now. Laughing at me for watching wrestling. So again, I ask, who's the demographic? Because it seems like a lot of the kids don't care to watch it. So did you find a way to lose out on that? I mean, you still do have the characters for the younger audience, but it doesn't seem to be resonating. Who does wrestling today resonate with? Oh God, and don't get me started on AEW.